Baptist Church. Let's all stand. We're going to turn to hymn number 375. Hymn number 375. Work, for the night is coming. Work through the morning hours. Work while the dew is sparkling. Work with springing flowers. Work when the day grows brighter. Work in the glowing sun. Work, for the night is coming when man's work is done. Work, for the night is coming. Work through the sunny noon. Fill brightest hours with labor. Rest comes sure and soon. Give every flying minute something to keep in store. Work, for the night is coming when man works no more. Work, for the night is coming under the sunset skies. While their bright tints are glowing, work for daylight flies. Work till the last beam faded, fade to shine no more. Work while the night is darkening, when man's work is o'er. Amen. Hey, Tom, would you open us in word of prayer this morning?
Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this Holy Spirit this morning, Lord. Pray in the name of service and financial class. I would be very sportive to work in the Holy Heart, Lord. I just thank you for the new blessings you've given. I pray you be with Pastor as he's day this day. Lord, be with him and his family. Lord, we pray that if there's one here that's lost, the Lord might come to Christ.
Amen. You can be seated. I did not grab a bulletin, so I don't have much to announce to you this morning. We do have our pastor is out of town today. He's preaching in Hillsboro, so we'll be praying for him this morning. And then coming up this Saturday, we have a youth activity here at the church. That's going to be Jeopardy. Dinner's provided, and there's a sign-up sheet back there. I think everyone who needs to know that has already signed up. But and then next Sunday, we have I Love My Church Sunday. So plan on being here. I don't know what all special pastor has planned for that, but should be a good day in the house of the Lord. So that's all I got for you. Let's go ahead and turn to hymn number 363. Sing them over again to me, wonderful words of life. Let me more of their beauty see, wonderful words of life. Words of life and beauty, teach me faith and duty. Beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Christ the Blessed One gives to all wonderful words of life. Still listen to the loving call, wonderful words of life. All so freely given, wooing us to heaven. Beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Sweetly echo the gospel call, wonderful words of life. Offer pardon and peace to all, wonderful words of life. Jesus, Holy Savior, sanctified forever. Beautiful words, wonderful words, Wonderful words of life. Beautiful words, wonderful words of life. Amen. I love it when some of you look up and smile at me. It makes me feel a little more comfortable doing this.
We are going to start this morning, as we always do, with sharing blessings. So if anyone has anything to share, first, I'm thankful that Derek led singing, because that means I didn't have to. So thank you, Derek. Who else is praising God this morning for something? Yes, ma'am. It was a lot of fun. Definitely. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I was reading my devotions today about Jesus being the door, and that his door is never locked, that his door is always open. Sometimes we go to places and we feel like we're shut up and the doors are locked, but the doors are always open, and it's the same way he's open to everyone. So we're trying to come to him, so I thought that was encouraging, and that he's always open.
Yeah, it's pretty great that we don't have to wait to go to a priest or a time of sacrifice. We can go right to God. Derek?
Family that we don't see super often this weekend.
Awesome.
It was a blessing, and we were a little stressed about going down to Hillsboro, but it ended up being a really good time. So.
See, the things you stress about never happen, so stressing works. Yes, ma'am.
People for the I got a surprise visit from Nadine, today, and she brought donuts for us to pray for us. And it was very nice.
Amen. It's awesome. Anybody else? Nothing from the teams? You guys aren't grateful for anything?
Hey, we do that.
Sorry, wouldn't want to steal your thunder. Anybody else? Absolutely.
So my wife and I, who are divorced and got back together a few times, we get back together.
Amen.
We've actually spent this weekend praying.
Amen. It's awesome. Anyone else before we dismiss the teams? All right, teams, you are dismissed. Going to be a bit of a shorter Sunday school lesson this morning because I want to take some time after the message to spend some time in prayer. But we're going to be in Exodus chapter 17 this morning. Exodus chapter 17. It's always awkward trying to preach about how we need to support our pastor when our pastor is here, so I figured I'd take advantage of him not being here and just take some time to talk about the importance of being there for our pastor, supporting our pastor, and just kind of being an encouragement to him. So we're going to start in Exodus 17 and verse 1. Exodus 17 and verse 1. And all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. The Israelite people had a lot of things come up and a lot of things they complained about and a bunch of just different trials of their own, caused by their own choices that they had to endure. And pretty much every single time they handled it really, really poorly when things went wrong. They complained about God, they complained about anyone and everyone other than just being grateful that they were no longer in Egypt. You can tell a lot about a person by how they handle hardships in life, and also how they will, how they respect or reference the person that God has put in charge of them during those problems, whether they sit there and complain. And I get it. We live in a country where we always have something to complain about when it comes to our leaders, no matter what side you're on. Someone's always doing something dumb when it comes to politics. But God still put those people in place. He still put them in charge of us. The Bible says that God sets up kingdoms and he establishes the thrones of men. So they are still placed by God for a reason, which means we're still supposed to have respect for them, which isn't easy sometimes. But that is no more apparent than in a church where we have to respect our pastor. We have to have a love for our pastor. We have to care for our pastor. There's two kind of responses that people typically have. The average response, which we're going to look at here in a minute, and then the above average response. So if you continue in verse 2 of Exodus 17, wherefore the people did chide with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why chide ye with me? Wherefore do ye tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted for water and murmured against Moses. Wherefore is this that thou hast brought us out to Egypt, to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, What shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me. Our default setting when things kind of get out of hand or things don't go our way, it's kind of just to complain. We complain about the circumstances, we complain about the people in charge, we complain about literally anything and everything around us, and just kind of settle for discontentment when things don't quite go our way. We're kind of naturally just that toddler who was trying to build a tower of blocks and builds it super unstable and it falls over because they didn't build it well enough, and they blame someone else because they walked 30 feet away from them and knocked over their tower by walking by. We set ourselves up for failure and then blame everyone around us instead of owning it and just being thankful for God and his mercy regardless of the situation. The above average answer, though, if you go down to verse 8, is twofold. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said unto him, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. There are going to be battles in life, and sometimes you're going to be asked to do hard things. It's not an easy thing to, especially back then, to go into battle, to pick out an army, to choose men that you know are going to die, and go out and fight against an enemy. But that's exactly what Joshua was expected to do. And he didn't question, he didn't complain, he didn't say, well, why me? Why are Aaron and Hur going up with you? Why can't they fight? Why can't I go up with you where it's safe? And our default setting when we're asked to do things can often be, well, why do I have to do this? Why can't someone else do it? Why me? But that's not what Joshua did. He took the above average response of just doing it without question, without hesitation. He just did as was expected of him by the person that God had put in charge of him. And then we look at verse 11, and it came to pass when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed, and when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomforted Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Notice when Moses started to fail, their first response wasn't to criticize him. When he was starting to get weak, their first response wasn't to criticize him. Their first response was without hesitation to come beside the leader God had put in place and supported his hands. They didn't lecture him on like, well, why aren't you doing better? You're not doing your job well. They just came alongside. They didn't sit there and lecture him. They just supported Moses. The same thing is expected of us in a church. Pastors are not perfect people. They are far from it because they're still people. They are never going to get everything right. They're never going to say the right things at all the right times because they're people. But we have a duty to come along beside them, to support them, to encourage them, and to be quick to encourage and slow to criticize. Because we will never know the amount of heartache, the late nights, the tears shed, the sorrow and frustration of someone who got their life right with God only to turn their back once again and fall to the wayside, of that person they so desperately want to see in church again who just isn't coming for whatever reason. Pastors go through so much heartache. They endure so much and often get so little in return. It was kind of a wake-up call for me. I wanted to go get coffee with my pastor when I lived in Idaho, and he was frustrated with something else. And like as soon as we sat down, he asked, well, what do you need? And I realized in that moment, my relationship with my pastor had only been based on when I had problems. I only wanted to spend time with him. I only wanted to fellowship with him when I needed something from him. I had set the tone that my relationship was just based on what he could do for me rather than what I could do for him. Yes, pastors are called to serve, and they do so willingly and exceptionally well. But we're also called to serve them. We're also called to support them. I would encourage you, take the time to text Pastor this week. Not because you need something, just to let him know that you love him. Let him know that you care about him. Let him know that you're supporting him. He needs that encouragement from each and every one of us. You never know what discouragement he might be facing, what troubles he might be dealing with, and I don't know anything going on. So this isn't for any particular reason. I just felt it laid upon my heart to encourage us to support our pastor, because we live in a world where we really don't support those above us. We sit there, we sit back, we criticize, we lecture, and we kind of just let them take all the fall, take all the blame without any of the support of us. And there's a cost for not supporting the people that God's put in charge of us too. Turn over to Numbers chapter 16 as I sing the song in my head, because I can never remember where Numbers is. Does anyone else sing the song in their head when they're trying to find something in the Bible? Numbers 16 and verse 1. Numbers chapter 16, verse 1. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, and the sons of Eliab, and On, and son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. And they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of God. These were already important, notable men. These were men of renown. These were people who were already in charge and already had duties. And yet they wanted more. They thought that Moses had elevated himself higher than he should have been when Moses was put there by God, and that was clear time and time again. But they wanted that station. They were discontent with how Moses was running things. They didn't like how things were going. They wanted to change, and they paid dearly for it. Jump down to verse 27. They gat up from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side, and Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents, and their wives, and their sons, and their little children. And Moses said, Hereby ye shall know that the Lord hath sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of mine own mind. If these men die the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath not sent me. But if the Lord make a new thing and open her mouth, and the earth open her mouth, and swallow them up with all that appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have revoked the Lord, and it came to pass, as he had made an end of speaking all these words, that the ground clave asunder that was under them, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all them that appertain unto Korah, and all their goods. They and all that appertained to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. And all Israel that were round about them fled at the cry of them, for they said, Lest the earth swallow us up also. Not only did the discontentment damage their reputations, their relationship with Moses, and therefore their relationship with God, it condemned their families as well. And we do the same thing when we sit there and we criticize, we backbite. It was always called having roast pastor for lunch after church, in the church I grew up in, where you go to church and then you spend the rest of the afternoon complaining about something the pastor said or something so-and-so did. And that was something that was never tolerated in our house growing up, because it is so incredibly destructive. When you begin to criticize the man of God, when you begin to criticize the church and the people that are in the church, especially to your families, you set the tone that it's okay to complain. It's okay to have that bitterness. It's okay to be backbiting in how we conduct ourselves. And we wonder why people my age in their late 20s who grew up in church are no longer in church. They're far from it, but that's because their parents made it seem like church was important. But as soon as they were gone from church, they talked about how awful everything was about it. And so that caused people to think, well, it must not be that important if they're willing to say all these horrible things about it. And there's a huge falling away of people in my age bracket because of it. They've become bitter, resentful. They look for any little problem in a church, like, oh, well, he wore a blue tie, and, I just can't support people who wear blue, so I'm out. Or his name was David. Nope, can't have that. And they look for any little thing. And I can walk into any church and I can find something to have an issue with within about 5 minutes, because they're full of people. Every church is different. Everything is done a little differently in every church. But why are we going around looking for the issues instead of looking for how we can support them? Their families were destroyed because they inappropriately challenged the authority that God had placed over them. Like I said, pastors aren't perfect, and he's not going to get everything right. And there may come a time where you do have to question him on something, but there's a right way to do that. There's an appropriate way to handle that. The wrong way is complaining or backbiting, gossiping, or undermining, going around to everyone like, I don't really agree with what pastor's teaching or the direction we're going, and just talking about it amongst other church people. It's not the appropriate way to handle it. The appropriate way to handle it is first to pray. Above all, every issue we have in life should be handled first with prayer. Because oftentimes our feelings get in the way, we get upset or we get frustrated with something, and we allow those emotions to dictate our actions. And that never leads to anything good. I think I mentioned it before, but I left the church I was in Longview for almost a year because someone made a silly joke about my brother that I took offense to, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And I allowed it to take me out of church for quite a while because I let my emotions dictate things. I looked at it from, oh, they were obviously just trying to be mean towards my brother, who I'm super protective over. But they weren't. They were just making a joke. It was a dumb joke, and I love the person who made it. But I let something that wasn't meant to be hurtful, wasn't meant to be harmful, dictate my emotions and therefore dictate my actions and draw me away from God. When we allow those little things to take place like a little grain of sand in an oyster's mouth, it becomes a bigger problem than it ever could have been. And we can stop so much of that by just praying about it from the start. Instead of letting it become a huge issue, just pray about it. The next thing we do is study it, because oftentimes I've found when I've disagreed with something a pastor said, it was because I didn't fully understand the topic, or I had my own misconceived notions about what the Bible said versus what it actually said. And more often than not, I've been wrong because I'm not a pastor, at least not yet. I don't know the Bible as well as they do. They spend a whole lot more time studying than I have. More often than not, God has given them the correct answer, and that can be easily figured out by just studying it out. And if you study it out and you find, I really don't agree with what he said, I don't think that's what the Bible is saying, the next step is seeking godly counsel. Not someone who's going to sit there and encourage the dissent or encourage you to backbite, but who's going to give you godly counsel and help you see it from a godly perspective. A deacon in the church, maybe a pastor from another church, something like that. But seeking godly counsel, not just an echo chamber that's going to encourage the negative ways of handling it. And then you bring the issue directly to the pastor. You go talk to him. Just talk to him. Let him, especially if it's a joke or something or a comment that he makes that offends you, just go talk to him. Because I guarantee you, especially our pastor, doesn't say a single thing that is meant to harm or offend or belittle anyone. But we all make jokes and we all make comments that can have that effect. And so just talk to him. More likely, it's going to be me that says something dumb that offends you. I'm just going to throw it out there. I have a terrible sense of humor and I'm working on it. But if something offends you, just go talk to him about it. It is so wonderful that when someone I made a joke about something and it bothered someone and they came like, hey, that hurt. I really don't like how you said that. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that whatsoever. Got it taken care of and didn't damage the friendship whatsoever because the person just brought it to me because I didn't know I hurt them. And that happens so often. The person might say something and they just don't know that the person was hurt by it. Just talk to them. If it's the pastor, if it's another person in the church, I know most of you pretty well, and I can pretty confidently say no one here intentionally harms anyone else in this church. We might get hurt, we might get offended, we might say something we might not mean, but there isn't a harmful bone in this body, I don't think. There's such a wonderful love, a kindness, and a compassion towards one another in this church. If something bothers you, just talk to them about it. Just talk to them. Let them know that you were hurt by it and see how much that can change things. Don't let resentment build up. Don't let discouragement or frustration build up. Don't let it come to the point where you feel the need to challenge the authority placed in your life because you're just so upset with how everything's been done. You've allowed your emotions to snowball and build this giant mountain out of a molehill that wasn't a problem at all. So much can be solved by just praying about it, by studying it out, and by just going to the person in the first place. So what can we do to support our pastor? What can we do to come along beside him and hold up his hands? Well, the first thing is we can pray for him. We can pray for him. We can pray for his wife. We can pray for his kids. Pray for him for godly wisdom and discernment and the different things he has to handle, the different situations that come up that you are never taught about in college. No one can prepare you for the random things you're going to come across as a pastor. No one can prepare you for someone coming to you with some horrible problem they've had in their life that you have no idea how to handle. Only godly discernment can prepare you for that. Pray for his discernment. Pray for his wisdom in studying the word of God and rightly dividing the word of truth. Pray for him to be able to present the word of God in a manner that's accessible and approachable for all of us. Pray for his wife who's there to support him, to be a helpmeet for him. The hardest job in the world is the pastor, but the second hardest is being a pastor's wife because they have to do so much behind the scenes. Pray for them. Pray for his children. We see it in the Old Testament constantly where the children of someone completely destroy the legacy that person has established because they go to the wayside and turn to the world. Pray for his children. Pray for their salvation. Pray that they grow up to be godly, God-fearing children. Pray for his family. Pray for him. Next thing you can do is show up for services and activities. It seems simple, but it is so amazingly encouraging to be able to look out into a crowd and see a face that maybe you haven't seen in a while, or maybe it's someone like Matthew who's here and occasionally. It's great getting to see him here. That's an encouragement. A person can be a blessing just by showing up. That is the easiest way we can be a blessing to our pastor. Just show up. Be an encouragement. It is so disheartening to get before someone. Like, I think the first time I preached, there was 3 people in the church that I was preaching at. 3 people showed up, which was fun because I was so nervous. I didn't want anyone else there. And they were like the people I really loved in the church. So like, okay, I'm okay with this, but show up. Show up to the activities. I'm not a big Valentine's dinner person. I'm not a big activities, going and play pickleball type person. That's not me. I'd rather just be by myself. But we missed out on the fun and the fellowship we might have had if we don't show up to those things. We're not called to be loners. We're not called to be isolationists. We're not called to be introverts. We're called to love one another, to show up for one another, and just be an encouragement and a blessing. Next thing we can do is be willing to do the hard jobs. It's great if you have an idea of something we can do in the church, a new ministry, a new opportunity. But the biggest blessing to a pastor is someone who just comes up to him and is willing, like, hey, pastor, I want to be a blessing. I want to be a help. What can I do? How can I help? What do you need? Because more often than not, there's a bunch of little things that have just gone neglected or unnoticed because there's just not enough manpower to handle the things already established. And so when we come and bring up like this new great idea, and it might be a wonderful idea, but if other things aren't being neglected already, there's just not going to be an opportunity for that new thing to come up yet. And you'll end up frustrated because like, well, pastor just never listens to my ideas. He just doesn't think I have good ideas. Chances are he thinks it's a great idea. We just might not have the ability to do it yet because we're lacking the manpower, or there are other things that need to be done first. It means being willing to clean the church, and I'm so appreciative for the people who come and clean the church, who vacuum. The carpet is a pain to vacuum. I've had to vacuum it a couple of times, and I don't know what it is, but it just like holds on to dirt with a vengeance, and it's impossible to try to vacuum. I appreciate the people who come in, who vacuum, who sweep, who clean the toilets, who take out the garbage. I'm so appreciative of that, and you don't know the kind of blessing it is. Because you want to know who ends up having to clean on Sunday morning if the church doesn't get cleaned? The pastor. Instead of being able to take the time to study and prepare and pray, he has to take care of cleaning, and he's happy to do it. I'm happy to do it when I have to come in and do it. But you can be such a blessing by just taking care of those little things. By looking after the small things in the church that you think are insignificant, you can be a tremendous and wonderful blessing. Be quick to come to his side and support him. Don't hesitate to just reach out to him, ask how he's doing. Let him know you're praying for him. Let him know you love him. Buy him a coffee. Buy him, I don't know what else he likes. He likes McDonald's and stuff, I think. Find out what he likes. Learn what kind of coffee he likes and just show up with it. He spends a lot of time here at the church studying, dealing with other things. Show up with a coffee. Find out if he's here, show up with a coffee, just let him know you care about him, give him a card, whatever it might be, whatever little thing you can do, be quick to do it. Don't put it off as you're worried about feeling weird about it. I have a really hard time texting people and saying, hey, I love you and I'm praying about you. That's just awkward for me. I don't like expressing my emotions. But I know for me, when someone's taking the time to send me a text saying, hey, I love you, David, I'm praying for you, it can make all the difference in the world. Be quick to come to his side. Be slow to criticize him or judge him. Oftentimes he'll have to make decisions or he'll have to do things that we don't quite understand from the surface because we don't understand the whole scenario that's going on. Give him the benefit of the doubt. Be patient, be kind, be caring towards him. Take the time to support your pastor. Take the time to pray for him. I know I don't pray for him nearly as much as I should. He should be in our prayer lives every time we go before God. Because if our pastor strays, and the news is filled with pastors who are good men who have gone to the wayside because they were distracted by the world or things came up, things tore them down. Pastors are under such tremendous attack from anything and everything. They need our prayer. They need our love. Take the time to pray for them. And with that, I'm going to close with a word of prayer, and I would like for us to take the next 5 minutes or so and just pray for our pastor, pray for our family, his family, pray for our church. Spend some time together and praying for the man of God that God has given us. Heavenly Father, Lord, I'm thankful for the pastor you've given us, Lord. I pray that you protect him, be with him as he's back in Hillsboro, Lord. Give him the words to say as he preaches, Lord. Help him be a blessing to that church. Help them to get home safely, whether they're coming home today or tomorrow, Lord. Just help them to have a safe travel. Help them to have a good time with family. Lord, just please bless the rest of the day and bless this time of prayer. In your name I pray. Amen.